Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
This is Kelly Weill, Flat Earth author. I guess I'm just making it seem like she's doing Flat Earth. But in reality, okay, hold on 1 second. Let me hide this while I admit Kelly. All right, let me see if we've got Kelly on. Kelly, can you hear me?
Hey, yes. Hi.
Do you have a camera available by any chance?
I do. Yeah. Hang on. I'll
Go ahead.
that on.
Okay.
How's it going?
Good. I hope you don't mind. The fast-moving world of Twitch is I'm live prior to the interview, and I don't have a producer. There's no green room. You're not gonna, we're here. We're starting
Okay,
this
that's
thing.
fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kelly, you are a reporter with the Daily Beast and a recent author of Off the Edge, which is a book regarding the flat Earth theory, flat Earth conspiracy theorists, and basically takes a deep dive into social media, a phenomenon that's continuing to grow, and hopefully can help us all understand how these type of conspiracy theories become so widespread and what happens to people's brains to make them believe something as absurd as QAnon or flat Earth. Is there anything more biographical information or stuff you want to plug for the
That's
audience?
most of it. If I'm going to plug something, buy the book, please. No. I really appreciate you having me on. Book came out late last month, and it's been a real trip getting to talk about this.
Well, Kelly, the thing that I thought when I first saw flat Earth, I hope you don't mind me jumping right into it, but when I first saw flat Earth theory, I thought it was a meme, kind of like a joke, like almost satire of like conspiracy theories. Like the Flat Earth Club was people, taking the piss basically. And then all of a sudden it started to seem like it got a life of its own. Is that accurate? Or how do you explain the beginning of like flat Earth?
So, I had the same read when I came into it too. Around 2017, I started seeing people post a lot of flat Earth content, and I had the same initial reaction. I'm like, they've got to be kidding. You can't possibly believe this in 2017. But they're dead serious. And the story of how we got here is pretty roundabout, actually. There's this myth that we've believed Earth was flat for thousands and thousands of years. That's actually not true at all. We've known for 2,000 plus years that Earth is round because it's actually pretty easy to prove. But what happened in the 1840s, as we had this guy named Samuel Rowbotham. He was an English inventor. He had a weird career. He led this failed utopian commune in the UK. Then he became a snake oil salesman for miracle cures. And then around the 1840s, he started promoting this theory of flat Earth. And he came to that conclusion because he'd run all these garbage experiments on a canal and said Earth looked flat to him. But he started promoting this theory in pamphlets and books and a lecture series. And just like we think flat Earth is ridiculous today, people in the 1800s thought it too. They showed up to these lectures to laugh at him, right? To make fun of him. But the downside to that is enough people went to these for, over a couple decades that they started converting. And he actually had a significant following. Like he was making real money. And that theory was influential enough that it's stuck around with us into its current incarnation today.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned this because there's a phenomenon in psychology known as the mere exposure effect, which is the idea that if you show people an idea, no matter how ridiculous, some small percentage of people are going to adopt it and believe it. And one of the things that we're facing with social media, from my perspective, is we've lost gatekeepers, which is in one sense good, because when the gatekeepers were wrong about things, then society at large never heard dissent. And then, we had big major blunders. For example, like the Iraq War. You didn't hear a lot of the dissenting voices there. Most of it was, padlocked to the gatekeepers. And so we kind of supported this foreign policy blunder, right? But at the other hand of it, the other side of that coin, we now have phenomenons like QAnon, where anybody can just post anything and the algorithms reward engagement. So the more outlandish, the more extreme, the more absurd content is, the more likely you are to get promoted by social media and actually spread among many people. And a certain percentage of people will believe in it. And so this kind of brings a thought to me that I want to know is, in my experience, these are comorbidities. If you believe that the earth is flat, aren't you much more likely to also believe that, the moon landing is a hoax, obviously, Newtown shooting is crisis actors, that, and so on and so forth. Is that what your experience, or is this flat earth kind of unique in that it unites people from all over the place?
No, comorbidities is a great way of putting it. One of the best indicators for somebody's potential to believe a conspiracy theory is if they believe in another one.
Right.
And flat earth is so all encompassing. It's not just like you can be maybe a 9/11 truther and still mostly exist within the schema of, accepted facts. But if you're a flat earther, you really have to toss out like all accepted facts and start inviting your own interpretations of reality in. And so I think when people buy into something as weird as flat earth, it makes total sense that they'll go looking into other political conspiracy theories like QAnon. They get into a lot of really weird religious conspiracy theories that I didn't know about, like giants and, druids and stuff like that. Absolutely. Sandy Hook, I've heard far too many times for me to personally stomach it. Yeah, it's a whole collection of conspiracy belief.
Yeah. So, okay. So when we face the reality that this is almost a certain type of being, right? I'm struck by, I got my start in the very beginning in securities arbitration. And part of that is dealing with people who are suffering from, a family member, typically a senior elderly person who's fallen for a scam, right? And one of the biggest predictors of falling for a scam is falling for a previous scam. And so you have like a certain trusting mentality, or you have a certain desperation for connection with other human beings that makes you susceptible to scams. And so something like flat earth, to me, it feels like it's that same kind of human behavior, which is, somebody trying to sell you a part of an independent film. Well, cold calling you to sell you the next great Hollywood script. Granny might buy into that, and there's no movie. In the same way that she might come across flat earth posts on Facebook and become enthralled. So is this kind of something that, we talked about as comorbidities? Is this something that is associated with a certain type of being, like being alienated, not having friends, substance abuse? Like what are the things that kind of can help us predict somebody who might be susceptible to this kind of misinformation?
Oh, wow. That's a really dark job. But, there are two things I'll say about this. One, generally, is that we all, to a degree, are susceptible to conspiracy thinking. And of course, there are real conspiracies in the world, but often conspiracy theories are a way of helping us grapple with feeling like we aren't in control of the information we have. Either we don't have enough information, or that information is unsettling, it doesn't uphold our prior beliefs, things like that. So people go looking for alternative answers. But even within that schema, we're all somewhat susceptible to it. Certain people do fall prey to this more than others. And I'm really glad you brought up the idea of alienation, because a lot of people who fall for conspiracy theories and fall for scams are looking for some kind of connection. They're, even in some ways, especially when it comes to conspiracy theories, they're looking for a kind of identity, a group with which to align themselves and sort of insulate themselves in a bubble. It's my group against the outside world. So that does tend to play to people who might be kind of disenfranchised, people who don't feel a whole lot of stability in their lives, and who can really be drawn in by someone who's saying, I have all the answers. And if you follow along with me, then not only will you understand, but you'll kind of be in my clique and you'll be among this privileged few who know what's going on.
Yeah, when you say that, I can't help but point out, from my left-wing perspective, that seems like it's almost everyone. I mean, you have an increasing precarity in so many aspects of our lives, from, education, housing, healthcare, jobs. People feel less connected to one another, just the way our culture has developed. We spend more time alone. People have less friends than they did in the past. They belong to fewer organizations. They leave the house less. You combine that with COVID-19 and what we're still experiencing coming out of the pandemic. Is this really like the best time ever for being a charlatan, spreading false information? And it doesn't seem to me, hate to be the pessimist, that things are going to get any better. What is your thought on the future of things like flat Earth and, QAnon and misinformation?
I wish I could be an optimist to offset that, but unfortunately, I have a lot of the same read. I do worry that there is a lot of atomization right now socially, and in terms of people's economic precarity as well. People don't have the strong networks that they might have had in the past, and I think in the absence of those real world connections, people do turn to things like online communities that don't, I think, give them adequate support.
Right.
I almost want to say fringe identities. I don't mean that in like a political sense, but identifying with a conspiracy movement, for instance, or
Right.
A lot of people will become very personally invested in a political candidate, not so much in their platform. So this is a roundabout way of saying that, yeah, I think conspiracy theories right now offer people an emotional sustenance that maybe they didn't in the past. And once again, I see these theories most prevalent among people who lack a certain social connection. A lot of them don't have stable employment, for instance, or a lot of them feel distanced from friends and family. And the horrible irony of this is that when you get into a really weird conspiracy like flat Earth or QAnon, you're likely to distance yourself from the real world community that you have.
Yeah.
And so people turn even further into these communities for support, and it's a really awful, vicious cycle.
Yeah. This is exactly, when you describe that, it takes me back to the cult-like behaviors. One of them, defooing, which is like the idea that you separate from anybody who disagrees with the idea that they may not be part of the conspiracy, but they're unwittingly supporting it. And so you need to separate yourself from that. And that seems to be an element of behavior. It's funny because that is common in all these groups. When I look at what you're saying, I can't help but be cognizant of the fact that this just seems like degrees to me. Because to make a more provocative argument, when I watch the Republican debate and they say, how many of you believe in evolution? And half or a quarter of the candidates raise their hand. Isn't that really a sign like that these views are extremely mainstream? Like the difference between thinking evolution is not real and the earth is flat is a matter of degree and social acceptability. It's not, they're both just as invalid from a scientific point of view. And so we in something like the Trump movement and the political movement of the right, as it's gone more and more extreme right, and I see no sign that it's going the other way, these kind of fringe beliefs are becoming worked more and more into the mainstream. And
I think,
what's your word? I mean, flat Earth is so extreme. That's probably not one that's going to become super widespread. But I see stuff like, Holocaust denial, or something like, evolution and creationism debate to be signs of more misinformation becoming mainstream.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you bring that up. One of the reasons I used flat earth as the lens for this book, which does explore conspiracy culture more broadly, is because it was so weird. And I was really tired I write about conspiracy theories in the more political context every day at work. And I was really tired of people being like, oh, Trump supporters don't actually believe what he's saying. And I'm like, yes,
I
they
absolutely
completely
do. Yeah.
do. And so when I explored flat earth theory, there was really a way to emphasize that people can believe anything if they have the right motivations to do so. So seeing these conspiracy theories become more embedded in the mainstream Republican platform is very frustrating to me in that, we can talk all day about how social media algorithms reward polarizing content or extreme content, and they do. But to a certain extent, these theories are so embedded in the mainstream right now. I don't think this can be chalked up entirely to a digital phenomena. They're
Right.
becoming a Republican platform. And so I think that's extremely frightening. I think that's a worrying trend. And they have just so much DNA in the Republican bloodstream. I mean, I remember a earth science teacher of mine in high school telling me that you're trying to deviate from the curricula and tell the class that maybe evolution was fake. And so that's not like a brand new thing. That's not a Trump thing. It's something that's been with this party for a long time. And now there are the right, I think, social conditions and the right digital conditions to really send those conspiracy theories in an absolutely ludicrous direction.
Well, yeah, we talked about the alienation, and I think this is a very important point. And I think people on the left, especially of my generation and yours, don't address it enough, is the failure of some of what I would call a local social institution. Like, for example, I'm in Pennsylvania right now, right? So if you were a blue collar worker, you probably had a union job and you had like a community church that you went to. And so you had all these social, institutions that would like reinforce a sense of community, right? You had the union meeting hall, you had a sense of solidarity with your coworkers, you had a bunch of people that you went and saw every day, and you had kind of a coherent political engagement through that union. And you might have, other social stuff through your church or other community groups. For example, like, the Polish club, right? For Polish immigrants. You had these social connections that were constantly reinforced and local and grounded you in like kind of a social context that was pro-social. All of that's gone. I mean, people are not members of unions. They don't go to church at anywhere near the same level. Church has become highly political as well, especially for the conservative party. Conservative movement has kind of hijacked religion in a lot of America. And so we have people just totally separated from one another. They don't have access to these institutions, and they have to reach for something like these internet communities. How do we build institutions to replace what we've lost and overcome the alienation that I feel is endemic to late stage capitalism?
That's a great question. I feel like it's like half for a city planner, it's half for a sociologist.
Right. I'm sorry if it was overly complex.
No, it's good. No, because it's a great point, and it actually gets at some themes that I've sort of explored in my other work. And there has been sort of a degradation of public spaces, both conceptually and physical in the US. There's this idea of the third place being, a meeting space outside the home, outside the work, where people would mingle, the quintessential town square. And that doesn't really exist in American public life anymore. People made a case for it being the shopping mall, and now we don't even have malls, which I don't think is a huge loss. But, we are seeing the evaporation of local businesses, for instance. Every brick and mortar is going out and being replaced by e-commerce or, a Walmart, something like that. These are long-standing trends, but I do think they get away that sense of social cohesion. And when that disappears, I think it's easier to lose that shared reality that we're all theoretically maintaining when we interact with each other and see each other in real life. So how do you build that back up? I'm not really sure. What I can tell you is that I feel like a lot of public mingling spaces these days are unnecessarily, and I would say almost like sociopathically politically charged. Public meetings, school board meetings
Yeah.
are just inherently vitriolic right now. And I don't know exactly how to turn the temperature way down. All I can tell you is that if I ran on a political platform, it would just be like, be normal, because I really, really feel like that is like a diagnosis that America needs right now. Is like, there's a real, I think, unhealthy and unsocial charge to a lot of interactions right now. And I do suspect that some of that derives from not having these healthy public spaces in which to engage with each other.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, but one of the things I would say is, we have this highly like stratified society, right? Where if you are somebody who has kind of a secure financial position, then you can interact and you don't feel the constant stress of trying to survive. It's a different experience than what a lot of other people are facing, and there is this separation. I feel like people are getting totally different experiences and they live totally different social contexts. Recent immigrants, if you went to Allentown, Pennsylvania, right, and you went and lived in a community of recent immigrants, they would have a totally different experience, from the way they get social services to the condition of housing to education to the way they're treated by police, versus if you drove 10 minutes outside the city and went to a suburban school district, and we don't have that kind of common experience anymore. And it draws people into these explanations for why things seem to be getting worse. Do you see like the conspiracy movement as a palliative towards like lack for people who feel like they are losing social standing or social status, and it's like a way of trying to explain it? Or is it just, is it something else is it just the social, needs that they're getting fulfilled?
In many cases, it is a palliative, yes. Or at least it's what a lot of academic research suggests. People who have been historically disenfranchised, I'm glad you bring that up, do have better reason to believe in conspiracy theories. We saw time and time again, with the effort to vaccinate the US, that communities that had been really ill served by public health systems had lower vaccination rates. And it's, it's one thing to say anti-vaxxers are out of their minds. And yet, when you look at justifiable suspicions people have of those institutions, no, it doesn't mean they're right about these vaccines, but you can understand the underlying motive. And I think we need to treat or address that mistrust before we just lump them in with anti-vaxxers who think that vaccines are going to cause autism. So there are, back to sort of some of the more clinical research, there are trends of conspiracy belief in disenfranchised communities, as well as communities worried about losing standing. So it's where you get a lot of, frankly, quite bigoted conspiracy theories in communities that are worrying about losing racial privilege. I was just talking to a reporter friend yesterday who reported on this county in Florida, Brevard County, and it had sent maybe the greatest per capita number of demonstrators to the January 6th riot.
Right.
And he said, one of the most compelling reasons he heard for that trend is that this was a historically white community that was rapidly seeing an influx of Latino residents, rapidly seeing encroachment or the feeling of threat from a more liberal community across the county border. And so that feeling of losing status, of being under threat, does tend to turn people toward comforting explanations, or explanations that help them feel like they're back in control of a narrative.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up vaccines because I think that's obviously one of the biggest problems we have. We've seen the phenomenon where, again, I hate to just bring it back to partisanship, but you basically have the largest group of anti-vaxxers are overwhelmingly Republican or Republican leaning. And at this point, now that doesn't mean there aren't people who are not right wing who haven't gotten vaccinated. There are, but the overwhelming majority of people who are not vaccinated are right wing, and they tend to get their views from a couple sources like Fox News or OAN or Newsmax. And so we've actually seen an increase in fatality among from COVID among the more Trumpian an area is, the higher the death rate. And that's kind of firmed up as the vaccines and the boosters have gone out over the past couple, year and a half. What do how do you explain the fact that even like mortality, like literally losing hundreds of thousands of people, including like right-wing, media personalities, has not made a dent in the anti-vax position? And does that worry you that there really isn't a material way to get through to people once they start accepting these conspiracy theories as an explanation for reality?
Oh, massively. I mean, I personally, I live in a red rural county. This is a huge concern for me. I think what's going on here is that this conspiracy theory, vaccine hesitancy, is becoming enmeshed in people's political identity. People identify themselves as we're the red team and we believe X, Y, and Z. There's no inherent reason vaccine hesitancy needs to be aligned with Republicans. A decade or so back, you might think of an anti-vaxxer as sort of a California hippie, kind of the granola mom. But because there has been, I think, this mutually like parasitic relationship between Republican voters and viewers and media sources like Fox News, where the viewers are getting these anti-vax views from Fox, and Fox understands that they have to keep kind of serving those up to satisfy their audience. I think that this completely illogical thing is being cemented as a central part of people's identity, that they can't really bring themselves to get up, even when it does show material harm. So people are more willing to overlook that harm or to dismiss it, say that, COVID deaths are actually due to mistreatment in the hospital, which is something I've heard all the time, than acknowledge that this thing that was core to their being is actually incorrect.
Well, yeah, I hate to use an analogy because it seems like but I think this makes the most sense. Like when a soldier goes into combat and he sees a friend die, he doesn't go, well, my side is wrong now. It might even redouble his effort to defeat the enemy because he saw, a comrade fall, right? So just because you see your friend, your family member die of COVID-19 doesn't make you think that, well, maybe I was wrong about the vaccine, or maybe my side's wrong in this war. You might interpret that as like evidence that the conspiracy is even stronger than you thought, or some other reason why your side is right, and the other side is wrong. On vaccines in particular, one of the things that I've seen, reported is that the belief that almost every Republican believes, 80% plus, is that the COVID deaths are overblown. Like the concept is basically the government is making up the number of people that have died from COVID. And the source of this was Donald Trump himself when he was president. Is he would go around and he would explain that, oh, no, it's overblown. The media, because he was worried about his electoral fortunes, he wanted to downplay the disease. And now that is something that everyone who's conservative believes. You can't simultaneously believe it's not that big a deal, but also, yeah, I definitely need to get the vaccine. Do you see like conspiracy theories like QAnon, like anti-vaxxers, dependent upon like trusted elites as well? Like, is that a huge problem of like, we mentioned, anti-evolution. I see this as like people and I think what you just said, sorry for this question getting rambly, but basically you have these as identity markers. And so people are segregating based on elite status within the identity group. They only trust people that first are filtered as part of their team. And so it's a necessary condition that they think you're part of their team before they're going to listen to you. Is this what we're seeing with like conspiracy thinking and people maybe more broadly in society? If that makes sense.
It does make sense. I'm thinking of a couple examples and some of them are conflicting. So I'm trying to synthesize here a little. It's funny because you are right that Trump definitely set the tempo, I think, for vaccine resistance in the Republican Party. But that said, nowadays, I almost feel as though the cart has got before the horse with him. And he's made comments at rallies talking about vaccines and got booed, which is bizarre. But that momentum, that vaccine opposition was something that I think really outstripped him. And you can argue that there was, initial vaccine reluctance before him. He didn't invent it.
Right.
But it is interesting. And I think kind of to my earlier point about how Fox News will cater to its audience. I think these audiences, once there's enough momentum behind a theory and when that theory is part of their identity, they will also sort of keep their authority figures in line.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So Trump, although he will, actually, I don't know the last time he's said something in favor of vaccines, although he has said it, he's not out there manning a vaccine clinic. He's not giving away, free Trump hats for your booster.
Right.
So there's very much an incentive for him to keep playing to his base, even though he is, quote unquote, an elite figure in that scene.
No, I think that's such a great point because, I have an axiom that I repeat to my audience, which is basically like Democrats hate their base and Republicans fear theirs. And so like you can kind of predict what a politician is going to do based on that kind of general sense. And like Republicans like Trump, he's scared shitless of his supporters. I saw that clip that you're referring to where he was like he wants to take credit for the vaccine. Because it was, Operation Warp Speed and a lot of the funding that got passed while he was president did lead to the relatively quick outcome. Give him credit for that, right? But when the vaccines rolled out and it was clear he lost the election, he took the vaccine in secret. He didn't publicly take the vaccine. He didn't want Joe Biden to get credit for his vaccine. But now he's trapped in this like catch-22 of I want to take credit of it, but I allowed this kind of vaccine hesitancy to grow. And now, if he goes up there and he says, take the vaccine, and his audience boos him, he goes, well, I believe in your freedoms, and so he's being disciplined by his base as well. And we've kind of gotten this position of like where things are totally out of control. We don't have a person or institution that we can go and like change in order to change these outcomes. They kind of have a life of their own. And that seems to me to be the future of conspiracy, which is it's just this virulent disease, just like COVID, and no one is in control.
Yeah. That speaks to a great point that I was thinking about this weekend, where the conspiracy theory is almost hollow. Like it's sort of like, it's almost just an empty identity marker. And what got me thinking about that was last week, Trump sent an email to his huge email list being like, can you believe the media is dedicating zero time to the scandal? This is the scandal of our century and there's no one talking about it. He never once said what the scandal was. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is the thing where, the signifier no longer has any bearing to the signified, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Wanky stuff. And I was thinking about that again when, I don't know if you've been following, but there was this attempted trucker convoy to encircle Washington, D.C.
Yes, we've been watching the hogs. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Hog watch. We love it.
That's right.
And And it was ostensibly in protest of mandates which don't exist. And I had reporter friends who were on the scene and were asking people like, yo, why are you here? And people couldn't always give a coherent answer. So this central rage and the central animus is kind of using these vague conspiracy supports to prop it up. And yet there's less and less actual evidence or argument in those theories. They're just kind of empty. And I think that's weirdly harder to argue against than something like flat earth, where it's like, go watch the sunset, tell me what you saw. And,
I think this is something that I've started to push to my community, which is just kind of an acceptance that the era of persuasion, kind of this like, is over. The Tip O'Neill, like, we're going to work across the aisle, and it's more a politics of like power and kind of just getting control of institutions. And the liberal belief that we can just sit down and come together, unfortunately, is like in the past, because they don't want to come down together with you. You being yourself is all the evidence they need. You're never going to get them to come and work with you on literally anything. And right now, Mitch McConnell, he says, I don't have a platform. Like, the Republican Party doesn't have a platform. He openly says it to the media. Our platform is defeat Joe Biden and get control of the government again. That's our platform. And Republican voters don't look at that and go, that's terrible, he's ruining the country. They look at that and say, hell yeah, beat the Democrats. And so we have this kind of like one party who's living on institutional momentum of a time deep in the past of like, let's work across the aisle together, and another party which is engaging in cutthroat power politics and steadily gaining control of institutions, even as a minority. And so when you go and talk to those truckers, they're Republican base voters, and you say, well, this doesn't make any sense, none of your views line up with your beliefs, like, what are you talking about? They're going to reject you as being a member of the lying media. There's no way for you to get through to them through a conversation, through persuasion. And that seems to me like a very dark future, but the reality that we're living in, do you think there's something to that? Or will the old, style of knocking on someone's door, is that still viable in the future?
I mean, I think that's really challenging, right? Because I think, to your point, Democrats don't really seem to engage with power in a way that's realistic now. They don't have what I think is the requisite cynicism, or often they're quite cynical, but it's, left punching.
I think Joe Manchin is very cynical, but
yeah. Well, he's, in any other political system, he's conservative,
right?
But I think it's interesting, this idea that compromise is sort of off the table, and I do think that to a certain extent, like when I talk to flat earthers, I don't try to convince them of round earth. And the reason for that is, one, I am media and I don't really want to dabble. And two, because I'm media, I know that they won't trust me. We'll hang out, we can be buddies and get along on a personal level, but I'm not the person to talk them out of a belief because they think I have ulterior motives. And here is where I kind of have to bring it back to our earlier discussion.
You want to sell globes?
Yes, that's right. I have a globe right there.
You're a glober.
I keep doing media. I keep doing media hits. I'm like, someone noticed the globe. So anyway, there it is. I think it's behind my head. Anyway, but I think I have to bring this back to like this idea of needing to have these conversations at an interpersonal level, at a level that isn't so rooted in political identity. Because what I find, and listen, I'm from a fairly rural working class area, and what really surprised me during especially 2016 is a lot of people I knew who grew up conservative were suddenly very interested in like a Bernie Sanders, and that was because he was speaking to certain, I think, legitimate grievances that transcended political party, or he was doing it in a way that transcended political parties. And I think some of the most effective conversations we can have, either politically or in terms of conspiracy theories, need to come out of sort of a shared humanity. So when I talk to flat earthers, or I'm sorry, ex-flat earthers, about what helped them deconvert, it was conversations with round earthers who recognized the emotional reasons that they went into that theory, who weren't coming at this from a place of harsh debate and trying to prove that person wrong, but of compassionate discussion with helpful pointers about why Earth is round. And they also, gave them a way to return to the round Earth. They didn't mock them when that person gave up their beliefs. So I think what I'm trying to get at here in a roundabout way is that I think in this era when talking points are very empty, the underlying conspiracy theories, like we said, are very empty, I think human discussions that raise real material issues might be the most effective venue, both in talking someone out of a false belief and maybe politically making inroads with people who, when neither party really materially addresses their needs, they just play along for the team politics, bringing people back into the material sphere. And I think that might be more persuasive than selling a Trump hat or a pink Women's March hat.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there was a study that just came out, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but basically it talked about conversations you're never going to get people, because there's a backlash effect of showing facts. Like you can show all the facts you want and people will not accept it. You have to anchor stuff with like empathy, and you have to, when you talk about like your opponent, when you have a discussion with them about politics, you have to anchor it in your own experience and show that you're rational, right? Because right-wingers, who believe in QAnon think all of us are irrational. We're believing lies, right? So we have a conversation with them about a topic. We have to anchor it in such a way that our beliefs are rational, right? Or if you're discussing, abortion with someone, you would have, the best way to do it is not to have a philosophical discussion about personhood or talk about biology or where, neurons connect or conception or theology. It's to have a conversation about like the experience of becoming pregnant against your will and what that would mean for your life. And so when we have these conversations with when you talk about deconverting from flat Earth, I'm sure it wasn't, I'm sure it wasn't some nerd saying, I'm going to debate you about the math. It was something that was probably a little bit more empathetic to that person and gave them the opportunity to change their view without losing face.
Absolutely. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, go on. Yeah. Sorry for talking so much.
No, it's all good. No, it's just giving me a lot to think about. And, I remember I do a lot of reporting on extremism, and there's all this theorizing about how to de-radicalize people. And although there's no great single solution, one of the best frameworks is sort of centering the victims of hate, or something like centering the people who are targeted by a bigoted belief and emphasizing their humanity, emphasizing their sameness.
Right.
And I know it can be really difficult to make that emotional space for somebody who has a bigoted belief. A lot of QAnon believers, for instance, believe really hateful stuff. And I can't say that I really expect everyone to open their hearts and, invite them into their homes. But that said, if anything works, it's probably that.
All right. Well, I don't know how much more time you have. We've been talking for 45 minutes. Is there anything else we can shill for you? Obviously the book. Mods, go ahead and throw the links to purchase the book, and hopefully your Twitter account, get those metrics up, right?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, do you have anything else that you're working on? After, I'm sure writing a book is a lot of work, and maybe you're taking some time for yourself, but what's in the future?
I'd like to say that I'm taking a sanity break. I'm actually not. I'm at work and I'm writing about, conspiracy theorists on the daily. But yeah, I'm extremely online. So if you want to drop me a follow on Twitter, I'm tweeting about all kinds of hell world stuff.
All right. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm definitely gonna get the book. Right,
awesome.
chat?
Thanks so much.
All right. I hope you have a it's Off the Edge, chat. Off the Edge. And the links are in the chat right now. We're going to from workman.com. Is that good? Is that the best
great.
place? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. Hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. All right, chat. That was Kelly. There you go. Hope you enjoyed the interview. We were just rambling about shit. I personally, let me just say this about deradicalization. Not my job. They're my enemy. Fuck them. Fuck them.